IULs are the most misrepresented legitimate product for insurance agents. At least that's what Mr. Chris Kirkpatrick says. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the legitimacy of IULs. If you are an agent currently selling index universal life or thinking about it, you must watch this video because there's a lot to say about the state of IULs, and it's not all pretty no matter what your MLM Kool-Aid drinking insurance IMO says. So let's jump right into it. Chris, how you doing today?
Awesome.
Give us a little bit of an introduction on yourself.
Yeah, man, it's great to be here. My name is Chris Kirkpatrick. Former director of business development for the top IUL company in the country. Left there about just over a decade ago now. And ever since that time, I went from being probably one of the top IUL advocates in the world, and then realized the deeper and deeper I got, the more and more I learned, the more I realized that the product just wasn't in alignment with what I thought it was doing, what I was told it was doing from from a financial investment problem solving perspective for people that I was selling the products to. And so I had to take a step away and take some time to figure out that it's so misrepresented, and it's my whole passion at that point in time became just educating people, because I spent 4.5 years in the IUL space before I actually discovered it and realized this stuff. And so you can imagine that when I had that realization, it was a tough moment, because I had sold hundreds of policies to people that I care about. And so when you're in that space, confirmation bias kicks in, right? And you're kind of like, you want it to be right. You want all the things that
Yeah.
you did to be right, because I did it with a good heart, right? Like I did the best I could with the information that I had. And so when I realized that the information that I had just wasn't enough, and that my relationships were on the line, and that I had misguided people because I had been misguided, then I had, the 5 stages of grief. I hit the anger stage, and it was kind of one of those situations where I wanted to expose the entire industry. And so it's a long story, but I ended up getting in a lawsuit. They sued me for non-compete and breach of non-disclosure, basically trying to claim that state that I couldn't share any of the information that I learned while I was at the company because it was proprietary information, right? And so they sued me. I won. It took 2 years, almost 2.5 years, but I won the lawsuit. Um, Nobody wins when you're in that spot, because the insurance company always has more money than you do as the individual, no matter what happens, and they just try to get you. But what I will say is, in that process of going through the lawsuit and whatever, I ended up giving up my license because that was the only way to avoid them suing me into the ground.
Wow.
And so I dedicated myself. So it wasn't until 2022 that I got my license again. So from 2016 to 2022, if you look at my channel on YouTube, I have all this educational content. And a lot of people go, "Oh, Chris, you just pitch all this education against IUL because you're selling whole life, and that's what you're trying to do." Like that's the most common statement, as you can imagine, that I get. Well, I would just encourage everybody to go look and say, from 2016 to 2022, I didn't have a license. I had a completely separate business. I gave up my license, and um, I created this YouTube content around IUL education simply to save people from what I went through. It was kind of my pay it forward moment, to the point where my wife was even getting pissed off at me for like spending time on this business and spending time trying to help people in this space. Because, you can imagine, after leaving the insurance industry, giving up my license, getting sued, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, my wife wasn't exactly thrilled with the industry. And so the fact that I
Right.
was spending time on the YouTube channel, wasn't an awesome thing for my marriage. But we got through, and then in 2022, I got my license again, and here we are. And but that's kind of my background. I love the insurance space. I think what we do is so important. I think like anything else, we have to think about, what are we doing? Why are we trying to do it? What problems are we trying to solve for the people that we're trying to serve? And that's my big problem with IUL. Not that IUL is a scam, not that it's a horrible product. I don't believe in good or bad. I believe in aligned and misaligned with the problems that we're trying to solve. And
So,
so
so yeah,
that's it.
tell us why IULs, because I think it would be safe to say that you feel like most agents, whether they know it or not, are just not presenting IULs in a
Yeah.
best aligned way for the interest of the clients. Can you kind of dive into that? Because a lot of agents
Yeah.
probably surprised thinking like, no, I've gone through the training my IMO provides. Of course, it
Yeah,
has to be
exactly.
legitimate, right? So what's being done incorrectly and wrong that's making IULs just very
Well,
bad choices for the clients that get approved?
well, I think first and foremost, you have to realize that the illustrations that you look at on IULs when you sell the IUL, like, right, if you're looking at if I okay, David, if I'm sitting down with you and you're a prospect, right? And I'm IULs are sold for a couple reasons. A, they're the easiest thing in the world to sell because when you look at the illustrations look sexy, right? They are awesome looking. Like I could put $500 a month away and then be able to pull $100,000 a year of income out in retirement. It's like it's delusional, right?
Mm.
But the fact that the illustrations look really good, and then the fact that people assign some sort of like morality to these insurance companies, like they care, like an insurance company isn't going to lie to us. So if they're showing us this illustration, it's got to be accurate, right? And the reality is nothing could be further from the truth. Look at the way that they handled UL, traditional universal life insurance,
Oh
from
yeah.
1980 to 2005, and how that kind of played out. And the bottom line is when I look at why I think it's misrepresented, I think and why it kind of is playing out the way that it is A, the illustrations are misleading. B, your company isn't training you on the product and how the product works. They're training you how to sell the product based
Right.
on misrepresented concepts, right? And so I think there's an old statement that I was told and it actually it was my GA when I first got into the IUL business. He always used to say, "Chris, don't tell me how the watch works, just tell me what time it is." And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm the kind of guy who wants to know how the watch works, right? And what's interesting is that with IUL, if you're going to go sell it, you don't want to know just what time it is. You need to know how the watch works, right? You need to know how this product works inside and out. And I've had millions of videos or millions of views on my content around IUL. And this is one of those areas where people can agree to disagree, but like this is when I really think about why I think IUL is misrepresented. I'll tell you, I created this thing called the IUL challenge for this reason, okay? Because think about it, what is and I want everybody watching this right now, if you're new to the business, think about it because it's your family, it's your relationships, it's your business colleagues, it's your future, quite frankly. Your upline really doesn't give a shit about you. I'm sorry, like they just don't. And they're really just trying to get access to your network so they can sell a product. That's how these IMOs work. That's the what I would call the internal consumption model of what they do. And so they're doing that. And so when you join the business, they basically say, all right, you get your people and we'll help you close the deals and so on and so forth. Well, as you're learning about the product, the extent of which you learn about the product, they tell you that the IUL provides upside potential, downside protection. You can't lose your money due to market loss, right? Due to the market going down. And therefore, the magic of indexing is going to solve everybody's problems. Well, first of all, if that were true, everybody in the world would be doing this. Warren Buffett wouldn't need to be Warren Buffett. Like it's not that simple, quite frankly. Secondly, we are coming through, and I could argue we're still in, even though it's not a technical thing, the greatest bull run of all time, right? I mean, we've
Right.
been since 2012, the market has been just bonkers. A couple down years, but all in all, it's gone haywire up with really not much downside aside from the pandemic kind of period. And so during that period of time, if the product is sold as with upside potential and downside protection. Well, we're in the greatest bull run of all time. So if these products are also sold with conservative illustrations, which is what they are, well, then I said, I want to see an illustration from 10 years ago, because 10 years is typically the surrender period. And so,
Right.
and this is key, and we can get into deeper, like if you really want to go nerdy on this, like why this matters. But um, I want to see a product that's 10 years old that performed the way that it was illustrated. It doesn't need to outperform it based on the fact that we're in this great bull run and it should have performed even better, because what does it say? Upside potential. If you can't capture upside potential in the greatest bull run of all time, when are you going to be able to capture it? You're not
Right.
going to be able to. And so the idea here is like, I said, well, people just prove it to me. Prove it to me that you can do this. Like, I don't care about your opinion. I don't care about my opinion. I started off the challenge and I said, I'll give $500 to somebody that can do it. And then nobody did it. And then I said, I'll give 1,000. Nobody did it. I'll give 2,500. Nobody did it. I'll give 5,000. Nobody did it. I'll give 10,000. Nobody did it. I had a couple of agents say, I want to chip in and help this cause. Now me and Robert Reichard, he's the #1 IUL litigation attorney in the country, have partnered up, and we're at $25,000 that we're offering to somebody that can show that these products will just do what they say they're going to do, or come close in the greatest bull run of all time, and nobody can do it. So my call to anybody who's new to this business is to say, you shouldn't be selling something that you don't understand, first of all. These products are misrepresented. That's why I wrote this book. It's 260 pages, and it's 260 pages because this stuff is complicated. The problem with IUL is it's a very complicated product that's sold as a very simplistic solution, and that's just not the way it is. It's not that it's a bad product. It's just not meant to be utilized the way that people are selling it. And so the IUL challenge is either IUL agents don't like money, which we both know is not true, or IULs just don't work the way that they're sold, which is the truth. And we've got history and proof on our side. People can argue all day long, but the bottom line is, the reason, and I'll share with you the reason that I stopped selling IUL and went away from it is I learned from an actuary that the company that I worked with shifted. They used to be a massive whole life company, and they shifted to IUL, and they really started shifting in the mid 2000s, like 2005, 6 area. And it was the 2011, 12, 13, 14, that kind of range, where their IUL sales started just skyrocketing. Okay. And when I talked to the actuary there, he said, well, Chris, we're starting to sell more IUL because it's more profitable, and we're going into this low interest rate environment. Now, remember, it's easy now. We know what we know. Hindsight is 2020, right? But going then, the actuaries and the people that manage this stuff are the best in the world at managing risk. So they were looking at long-term risk, and they were looking at their whole life portfolio and the guarantees that they had to match going into this low interest rate environment. And so when you look at why is IUL sold, well, a lot of these companies shifted to selling IUL because it shifted the risk from the insurance company having to meet their guarantees and put all the risk back on the policyholder, right?
Right.
Which makes it more profitable for the companies because they don't have to meet their guarantees. There's all these levers and moving parts inside of these products that can be shifted, and that's just not talked about. That's the problem, is most of the time these products, they focus on only this one little sliver of potential, right? And they're able to do it because legally the potential is there, right? And it is, like, in a vacuum, in a perfect world scenario, if the current assumptions stay the way they are and if variables don't change, and every market environment stays exactly like it is in a vacuum, IUL could potentially work. But we all know that that's not going to happen, and it never has, it never will. And therefore, IUL illustrations are worth about the equivalent of toilet paper
So
once we get
yeah,
into
I
them.
want to get into that because I'm curious.
Yeah.
So it has been very long bull run. IUL has been around for 10 plus years. What have you seen looking back into the past 10 years? with what was projected in the illustration as how the
It's a
thing was going
joke.
to perform? Yeah, what are you actually seeing so that people who are new to this know like what this actually comes out to
Yeah.
in the best of times, not in the worst, like you're making the
In
distinction here.
in the best of times, on average, I'm seeing about a 20% underperformance of what they were sold as, right? But to get even worse, like I've seen like, so I just looked at an illustration, I don't know, a couple months ago. That was a nationwide illustration, right? And you don't mind me calling out companies, right? Like I'm the guy that just calls everybody out. Okay. So it was a World Financial Group, situation. It was, like just whatever. And the policy actually performed not horribly. Like it was in year 7. And the policy, I think was only like $400 behind pace, right? Like on what the original illustration was. This is in year 7. And that's, most people would look at that and be like, it's a rounding error. It's not that big a deal because we're
Yeah.
talking $60,000 in the policy. So it wasn't a small policy. It wasn't a massive policy, but it wasn't small either. And so if you're supposed to have 60,000 at year 7 in cash value, and then you end up having 59,600, you're kind of thinking this thing's doing pretty much what it said it would do. This is a good
Sure.
thing, right?
Yeah, right.
The challenge is all the internal mechanisms in that policy have now changed, right? The cap rates have changed. They've lowered the surrender, as the surrender goes out further from purchase date and the surrender charge reduces, all the rest of the moving elements in the policy can shift. Because think about it, the bigger the surrender at the beginning, the risk is low to the insurance company because you're not going to move your money. They got all your money tied up. As your money gets liquid and they become a little more risky or more at risk or exposed for the insurance company, that's where they start to move the cap rates and spread charges and just participation rates and all the different things that go along with these things. So in this situation, just to kind of give you an idea, the policy, if you were an average individual that would buy one of these things, you'd look at it and you'd be like, it's not that bad. It's pretty good. It's actually kind of doing what I thought it would do. But what you wouldn't see as an uneducated eye is the fact that the cap rate went from when you purchased it, went from 11.5 down to 7.75, right? And so now, even though it looks good now, if you run an in-force illustration and you go and you keep laying the in-force illustration compared to the one that you sold, by the time you get to year 10, you're way behind. And by the time you get to year 30, you're like at 25 to 30% of what you thought you would be at, which is, we're if you think about any insurance product, you're buying an insurance product not to solve an immediate problem, but a long-term problem, right?
Right.
Like we're always trying to solve long-term problems. And especially with IUL, as IUL is sold as a tax-free income vehicle, right?
Right.
It's the long-term problem of you sell to a 40-year-old. It's like, I don't care what it does for me in the next 5 years or that it's on pace. Because this is the number one argument I get is people like, I've got a 5-year-old policy. It's doing exactly what I thought it would do. Well, that's great. I don't care.
Yeah.
Talk to me 10, 15 years from now, talk to me 20 years from now. And if you can't show me a policy that's 10, 15, 20, 25 years old, which the industry's 27 years old now, 28 years old, like if you can't show me one that's 10 or 15 years old that is doing exactly what it said it would do, well, then what are we even having this conversation about? You know what I mean? That I think the proof is in the pudding that it doesn't do what they say they're going to do. And if you're a new agent in the business, you have to be bold enough to stand up for yourself and to stand up for the people that you're going to be selling to, and make sure that you fully understand you're not selling something you that you're uneducated about, right? And go to your upline, go to the person who's training you, and demand proof. Don't just sell off some sales presentation. Don't just sell off the illustration because it will ruin relationships for you. Demand proof and use my challenge. Tell them, hey, I got 25K for them. If they can show you proof, now you can have complete confirmation that you're doing everything right in the best interest of the people that you're trying to serve, and you're giving that your upline a chance to make 25K. I mean, that's pretty cool.
What, and maybe I'm being naive asking this, but
sure, go ahead.
I hear IULs and the concept behind them. It's similar, if not the same, with whole life. So I can understand, okay, the insurance companies they want more profit margin. They're shifting risk from not having
Yeah.
guarantees to
Yeah.
then shifting it to the consumer. Why would the
Sure.
agencies push this? Because they've been doing
Oh,
the
that's
same thing for
easy.
years. Yeah,
That's
give me
easy.
the
That's
rundown there.
easy. So first of all, there's a couple companies. So with whole life, um, most whole life companies are the Mass Mutuals, the Guardians, the Northwesterns, the New York Lifes. That's kind of the old guard, right, of the whole life industry. Um, and even stuff like Lafayette and One America, more independent distribution. You got Mutual Trust, you got Security Mutual, you got like all these companies, right? And they don't play the game with the IMO world, right? So it's
Right.
the insurance carriers. So, and here's what I mean. If you go, National Life Group is the number one IUL company in the business. So the question is, why are they the number one IUL company in the business? It's not because they have the best product. It's because they built a compensation plan, and from a corporate level, they said, we're going to partner with these IMOs, and we're going to build their compensation model in with their generational upline comp flow, all that stuff. We're gonna build that in, and we'll manage it from our side. Whereas whole life companies go, no way. So like if I wanted to build an MLM kind of downline IMO, right? And let's say I'm building a team, I could go as many generations deep as I want to, right? As many levels deep as I want to. Well, all these whole life companies, most of them will only go 3, 5, or the most I've ever seen is 7 deep, right? And so
Right.
when you start thinking about building out a hierarchy, and this is what we do at Life 180, right? Like I run a whole life participating mutual whole life IMO. We're only able to go 7 generations deep because that's the biggest that it goes. 7 levels, not even generations, 7
Right.
like agents deep, right? But then after we have our agency and then the individual, like I can only really recruit 4 or 5 levels deep as far as agents that I'm recruiting on the team. And so that just doesn't fit into the MLM model that
Ah,
everybody's operating with. So they can't even technically do it. Now, the one way that they can pull it off, and this is the thing, and I don't know how you feel about this, so I'm not going to go too bold either way, but the LOA idea, right? Which I have no problem with LOA, but the thing I do have a problem with is when they position you like you own your own book, and then they do LOA, and it's like this bait and switch, smoke and mirrors kind
right.
of deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is what happens in like the WFG, PHP, PFA, like those models. They're like, oh no, you own your business, and whatever. It's like, no, you don't, and like you don't own anything, but they do everything they do so they can control the business, and that's fine. It's if you're operating in a certain business model, listen, the LOA model exists for a reason because it works. It's the best thing for some people. It's the best way to support an agency in some ways, but in the way that these IMOs are doing it to create these big elaborate comp plans to get around the way that insurance companies want you to do it, that's where I have a problem with it. And that's really what's happening is that whole life companies are not wanting to play that game with them as much.
Yeah.
And IUL companies are. And not only that, listen to this. The top participating mutual companies, most of them, there's a couple that'll pay like the top contracts that'll pay 130, 135, right? The top IUL companies are paying 170,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, that may not seem like a lot to the novice at home or the new agent, but it is a wild difference when it comes to building out a compensation model.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anybody that says you make more money in whole life, or whole life agents make more money than IUL agents is just,
Oh no. No.
it's disturbing.
So basically, what you're telling me is that the MLMs are doing it because of the money. Yeah.
Yeah,
For the
because
dollar.
of the money, because of money and control, and I mean
Yeah.
ultimately the control comes down to the money, but they want to be able to control all the moving parts. They want to control you. They want to control your business, I don't care who it is. That's what this is about. All these 3-letter IMOs that do this, that's what it's about. So I would always encourage anybody that goes into there to make sure that you're holding your upline accountable and you're saying, hey, show me proof that this actually works, you know? And if they can't, well, then if they can't, it's either they haven't been doing this long enough. And so what do they really have for success? So maybe you should find a mentor who actually has a little success, you know, in the business, or B, it just doesn't work, in which case, you know, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
So tell me about the lawsuit risk with IULs or some of the stuff you mentioned, a gentleman earlier.
Oh yeah.
What are we looking at as far as the potential for agents being held responsible, IMOs being held responsible for pushing IULs that are just flat out inappropriate?
Yeah, I mean, it's IUL is a life insurance product. So the area, I'll answer that by giving kind of two things. It's IUL. Listen, I sell IUL every now and then. Okay, I know that shocks a lot of people, but I will sell an IUL when you attach a guaranteed insurability rider to it. And it's basically like a GUL with some living benefits that you can attach to it, right? I will never sell an IUL, and where IUL really falls apart is during the tax-free income conversation. Anytime you talk about IUL in the tax accumulation or the cash accumulation kind of idea concept, or tax-free retirement income distribution, that's where the wheels fall off. Anytime you mention IUL as a better alternative to a 401k, a rich man's Roth, anytime you talk about an IUL in terms of investment alternative, you are out of compliance. And, you know, Robert Reichard, he's an amazing attorney. I've built a great relationship with him. I've done a lot of videos with him. I think that's actually how you found me, right? Is, you know, in doing my content with him and having my conversations with him, he's won hundreds of cases on this stuff, and he's 100% on it. And he gets them settled. A lot of times they're settled and sealed at arbitration, which we could talk about. But, you know, the bottom line is the reason he wins is because it's being sold as an investment alternative, right? And so just know that if you are out there, and listen, I've seen all the sales presentations of every single IMO, from FFL to WFG to PHP and PFA, every single 20 to 25 page sales slide deck that's out there selling them, every single one of them technically would lose in a court of law. And you will. So if you go down that path, you're taking on that risk. And so just make sure you're fully aware of the risks you're taking on, or maybe just have some integrity and do your due diligence up front and avoid it altogether, and make sure you're doing things that are truly in alignment with what you're trying to accomplish. But, you know, yeah, it's really not good. It like that is the biggest problem, is that they're being sold as an investment alternative, and that's not how they function. IUL was not designed to be a tax-free income vehicle. If you look at it, it's the upside potential conversation is not designed to be a marketing pitch. That was Patrick Kelly who created this marketing pitch, but IULs were around for 12 years before that marketing pitch became popularized. Right. And that's and that only happened because of the Great Recession, right? That when the market went down and somebody got creative, the whole upside potential for an IUL isn't compared to the market. It's compared to traditional universal life. Because if you look at every IUL out in the market, you can choose different indexing options, and you can choose a fixed crediting strategy inside the IUL. Well, I got news for you. If you choose the fixed crediting strategy in an IUL, you just turn it into a traditional UL, right? And so the IUL, the index component, gives upside potential compared to the fixed crediting strategy. That was the reason that the languaging existed in the first place, not because the upside potential compared to the market, so it's wordplay, it's misrepresentation. This is the stuff that matters that people need to understand. And by the way, if I were wrong on this, if I were wrong, if everybody go look up regulation AG 49, 49A, 49B, and now we're going to be coming to 49C. So what that does is regulation AG 49 is what regulates how these things are able to be illustrated, right? And the challenge is in 2015, regulation AG 49 came out, and because it was craziness, right? But I always equate it to the feds chasing Capone back in the day. You know, like he got away with stuff for so long, right? Why did he get away with stuff for so long? Because he was a private company, effectively, right? And the federal regulators and the FBI, who was chasing him, they had to follow every time they wanted to get a warrant. What did they have to do? They had to go move slow. They had to go to a judge. They had to get a warrant. It takes time. In the meantime, he had all these informants that told him what was going on. So by the time they got to where he was already gone, right? Like, and it was, they couldn't catch Capone. They actually had to catch him for something completely different, tax evasion, that buried him, right? Well, with IUL, what happens is 2015, they changed the regulations on how because they realized IUL illustrations they were misleading. They were misrepresentative. They were not in good faith, which is a big part of this, right? And so what did they do? They said, we need to update the regulation on this. The problem is they did, but every time you want to update regulations in the insurance space, well, first of all, let's ask this question. Is there any industry that moves slower than the life insurance industry? No. Right? No. And so they do this and they finally get the change, and then bang, these actuaries at these companies, it was Pac Life that led the charge on this time, you know, and they created these like different moving parts in the illustrations, like the multipliers and the bonuses and all this stuff. It made it so they illustrated just as well still, but it doesn't mean just because they can get them to illustrate and they can get around the illustration regulations and rules, it doesn't mean that they're going to actually perform that way. It's just it's kind of like the cup game, you know, like when you move the thing around. And so it took 5 years from 2015 to 2020 for them to update that, right? The changes. The companies got away with it for 5 years again. And then 2020, they updated to AG 49A. And then finally in 2023, they updated it to AG 49B. And once again, every time they do, though, these companies just keep changing and they're getting ahead of it. So we're going to need massive overhaul, but I got news for you. If these illustrations were realistic, regulators wouldn't constantly be changing the illustration regulation on what's allowed to be shown, right? Because there is a lack of good faith and there is misrepresentation. And this isn't an agent problem, by the way, David. This is a company problem, top down, from the national life groups to the nationwides, to the Pac Lifes, to the Symetras, to the Allianz. Like, all these companies are guilty of this. They're just misleading the sales field on how these things actually work. And that's the problem.
Where do you see IULs in the next 10 years? Are they going to be around? Is there going to be more regulation? Do you think that things are going to change, get worse, get better?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time before the whole thing unravels. You know, I've been playing the long game on this. I think people are getting more and more exposed. I think the biggest mistake that IUL made was they got into the premium finance space, because now what happens is you get a lot of wealthy people. It's one thing when you take advantage of middle-class people because you can get away with that because, you know, people lose their $10,000 or $20,000 and then they move on because it's not lawsuit worthy. When you start doing it with premium finance, and, you know, we've got a handful of cases right now where people are 7-figure losses plus in these IULs. And when that happens, well, you mess with people with that kind of money and they expose what you have going on, right? And if it doesn't work at that level, it doesn't work at the lower level. And so now you start seeing cracks in the foundation of what's going on and how the industry works. And so to answer your question, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a lot more clarity that these things don't work as they're currently being sold. I think there's going to be tons of lawsuits. To that point, you know, for every one lawsuit you see in IUL that's public, there's 100 of them that are settled and sealed in arbitration,
Right.
which means you're not even allowed to talk about them. Because if you get a settlement and it through arbitration and you sign off on that settlement and you get the money, you basically sign off to not being able to speak about it. And so
Yeah.
people are like, oh, it would be so public knowledge if these things were so bad. No, hundreds of these things per year are getting settled on. But people just legally cannot talk about it.
What should agents do if they can't sell an IUL because of the reasons you discussed, but they
Yeah.
like that tax-free retirement strategy? Like, what would you recommend them to do instead? And as far as
Well, yeah, I would say this is first of all, life insurance should never be your sole source of income in retirement, right? Like I'm a big believer in whole life insurance, and I guess that's kind of where my journey took me is as I started going down the path. I found whole life insurance and I realized like, wow, like everything I'm saying for the most part, whole life insurance is actually the answer. Um, when you design it properly, when it's, there's all the caveats that go along with it. And I'm not saying all whole life agents are great either. But what I will say is that um, when you're looking at planning for retirement, when you're looking at long-term solutions, life insurance is not the secret tool the wealthy use to get rich. Life insurance is the secret tool that the wealthy use to stabilize their wealth. It's the tool that they use to protect their wealth. They may utilize it to help as a piece of a greater puzzle, but they're not accumulating money in. Like, I utilize whole life insurance. We utilize it in our life, but we're not I'm not building my wealth in the policy. I'm leveraging the policy for real estate, for business, for other things. Um, but my belief is there's no product that's going to solve your problem. You got to become who you need to become to get where you want to go. And I have a formula. I call it the Life 180 Wealth Formula. It's called clarity plus alignment equals the life you desire. So the first thing you have to do is get really, really clear about the life that you want to create. And when you have that clarity, now you can do an alignment audit on where you're aligned and where you're misaligned with what you say you want in life. And then you have to make sure that you understand, are you utilizing the right products and you have the right balance of investments to create the life that you want to create. And anybody that tells you that one product is the solution to everything, just turn and run as fast as you can. Like, it's
probably in an MLM.
yeah, most likely. Yeah, most likely. Although I've seen plenty that are not MLM.
Right.
Like,
Sure. For sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've seen people like Dan Thompson and the Flex Method and Curtis Ray, and all these MPI stuff and like all these different things of people that just create their own ecosystems
Right.
and then they're really good at marketing. And so I don't want to make it just the MLMs. The product as a whole is very flawed when it comes to cash accumulation and distribution. But the way that
Right.
the way the illustration regulation, it makes the illustrations look like it's sexy. Listen, if IUL illustrations did everything that they said they would do, my life would be a lot easier because I'd just sell a ton of it and I'd make a
Right.
lot more money than I'm making right now. My, you know, if I could just sell out for a year and just, be willing to steal money from people and go sell these things, I could probably make 10 million, 20 million next year alone, but
Right.
I just refuse to do it.
Well, Chris, thank you for being here. Tell us where my viewers can find out more about you.
Yeah, man. So I got a YouTube channel. It's called Life 180. I think I have the most in-depth, if you really want to learn about this stuff. I've got an IUL playlist that has like 200 videos on it, like not to overwhelm people, but there's super deep dive on it. So go to Life 180 on YouTube. You can always email me, chris@life180.com, if anybody has any questions. If you have an IUL, if you like maybe joined an MLM or you got sold to by an MLM, I have a company called a page called rescuemyiul.com, and it's all about you can submit your stuff and my team will for free give you a review and help you. And if you really want to learn, this is my thing is as an agent, you should never sell something you don't understand. I don't care what product we're talking about. And so I would say go to IULexposed.com. And that's my book. This has been an 8-year passion project of mine where I finally got it finished. It's getting the technicals, it's a lot because because the target was always moving, the industry's changing.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, and so I was never really happy, but I finally got it launched in February, IULexposed.com. And I would say, until you read this book, you shouldn't sell an IUL. If you get through this book and you're comfortable selling an IUL, then, well, then God bless you.
Chris, thanks for being here.
And so that's it. Thanks, brother. It's been fun.